Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. Today we're going to do a deep dive on something that I think is so interesting.
Yeah.
The dramatic rise and fall of Byju's, the Indian ed tech company.
Oh, yeah. It's pretty wild story.
Yeah, a few years ago. I mean, they were valued at $22 billion.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And now they're battling insolvency.
It's
What happened?
I know it's a story that has captivated a lot of people.
Yeah.
And we're going to look at a lot of different sources for this one to try to piece together what happened. We've got YouTube interviews with former Byju's CEO. We've got some Indian news reports. We even got our hands on some legal documents from India's insolvency regulators. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah, we're going pretty deep on this one.
Yeah, so we've got a lot to cover today.
Yeah.
We're going to explore everything from their aggressive sales tactics and maybe some questionable financial practices to the impact of the pandemic on their business and just the overall edtech landscape.
Yeah, for sure.
If you're at all interested in the future of education, the world of startups, or just how quickly fortunes can change in the business world,
Oh, yeah.
you're going to want to stick around for this one.
Stick around.
All right, so to really understand what went wrong, I think we need to go back to the beginning.
Yeah, back to the beginning.
Our sources describe Byju Raveendran, the founder, as kind of someone who embodies this classic, ambitious Indian student.
Right.
From a small town, excelled in his studies, went into engineering, got an MBA, a very familiar path for many aiming for success in India.
Classic. Yeah, that's right. And he was tapping into a massive and fiercely competitive education market when he launched Byju's as a test prep coaching company way back in 2007.
Yeah.
2007, that's a while ago.
Wow. And it sounds like his teaching really resonated with students.
Yeah.
The former CEO mentioned that Raveendran actually recruited some of his first employees from his own top-performing students.
Interesting.
Talk about putting faith in your own methods.
Yeah, that speaks to a certain level of confidence, for sure. And those early demo classes were legendary.
Yeah.
Like mini performances designed to captivate both students and their parents.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, some people saw them as incredibly persuasive, almost to a fault. Almost too good.
There's a story about Raveendran actually personally demoing Byju's products to every customer in a store in Dubai.
Oh.
So it shows you how hands-on and passionate he was about this in those early days.
Yeah, that's a great anecdote, but it also kind of foreshadows what became a core part of Byju's strategy, this heavy reliance on salesmanship.
Okay.
Their incredible growth,
Yeah.
Becoming India's most valuable startup, attracting over 150 investors, and reaching that $22 billion valuation was largely fueled by a very aggressive expansion strategy.
Yeah, and a lot of acquisitions too, right?
Oh, tons.
They bought companies like White Hat Jr., the coding platform for kids,
Right.
and Akash, which is a big player in the test prep market. Plus, they went all out on marketing with celebrity endorsements.
Oh, yeah.
Shah Rukh Khan and even Lionel Messi.
Huge names.
Right.
And at first, the pandemic seemed to work in their favor. Everyone went online,
Yeah.
which led to this surge in demand for edtech solutions. But this rapid growth wasn't without its consequences.
Right.
And soon cracks started to appear.
This is where I think things get really interesting and maybe a little concerning.
Yeah, definitely.
The former CEO is surprisingly open about this period.
Yeah.
He admits that they lacked cost control, that they made investments without a clear path to profitability, and they became almost fixated on growth, especially with that easy access to capital.
It's fascinating how he describes getting swept up in this grow at any cost mentality that was so prevalent in the startup world at the time.
Right.
I mean, it's a reminder of how easy it is to get caught up in the hype, especially when everyone is telling you you're the next big thing.
And the warning signs were definitely there. People were raising concerns about these aggressive sales tactics. Stories were emerging about parents being pressured to buy these expensive courses, and there were even allegations of misleading promises and loans being pushed on families who couldn't afford them.
Yeah, people were starting to see that this couldn't last forever.
Yeah, some people saw this coming and predicted that the bubble would burst.
And burst it did.
Yeah.
Byju's downfall was as swift as their rise was meteoric.
Yeah, it really is a dramatic turn of events.
It is.
They ended up defaulting on a $1.2 billion loan, facing investigations for financial violations, owing money to BCCI.
The Board of Control for Cricket in India.
Yeah, huge deal in the country, and they're even struggling to pay their employees.
It was a domino effect, one thing after another.
So this brings us to one of the key questions about what were the main factors that contributed to this crash?
Right. What do our sources have to say about that?
Yeah.
Well, they point to a perfect storm of different factors. The pandemic boost was temporary.
Right.
As things went back to normal, people returned to offline learning. Those big acquisitions didn't generate the revenue they expected. And then the U.S. venture capital market, which is a major source of funding for Byjus, started to dry up.
And the bad press didn't help either.
Oh.
You had disgruntled employees sharing stories about exploitation, unhappy customers feeling misled, and then there was that incident where a customer's television was repossessed.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. That one really captured public attention.
It did. It became a symbol of Byju's aggressive debt collection practices and just the financial strain that many families were under. It also shows the power of social media in amplifying these kinds of stories.
For sure.
It's a stark reminder that a company's reputation is incredibly valuable and can be very easily damaged.
Yeah, it can change so quickly.
So you've got this combination of a changing market, some internal issues, and this tarnished public image all happening at the same time. What does the former CEO say about all of this?
Well, he's surprisingly reflective.
Okay.
He admits to some missteps, but he also blames external factors and argues that the whole startup ecosystem was obsessed with this short-term growth over long-term sustainability.
So it's not just about placing blame on individuals.
It's more nuanced than that. Byju's story isn't just about one company's failure, but a reflection of these larger trends and pressures within the tech world, particularly for startups.
So Byjus is now facing insolvency proceedings.
That's right, insolvency proceedings.
Wow, that sounds serious. Can you tell me more about that?
Well, remember that jet they owed to BCCI.
Yeah.
That's what triggered these proceedings. BCCI initiated them over the unpaid dues, and now Byjus is caught in this legal battle.
Okay, so what's the latest on the legal front?
Okay, so our sources mentioned that the Supreme Court actually got involved.
Wow.
And this is where the legal documents we have become really important.
Okay.
The Supreme Court recently overturned a previous ruling that had halted the insolvency proceedings. They were actually quite critical of how the case had been handled up to that point, emphasizing the importance of transparency and compliance with insolvency laws.
Okay, so that sounds like a major setback for Byjus.
It definitely is. This decision puts their entire future in jeopardy and raises serious questions about whether they can recover at all.
All right, so we've covered Byju's early days,
Yeah.
their explosive growth strategy, and then this very sudden crash. Now they're dealing with insolvency proceedings?
A lot happened.
What else can we glean from our sources about this wild ride?
Well, there's a lot more to unpack. This whole situation has sparked debates about corporate governance, the role of investors. We'll dive into those, and we'll also look at what this means for the future of the edtech industry as a whole.
Okay, so there are much larger implications here that we need to examine.
Definitely.
But first, we need to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more on the fascinating rise and fall of Byjus. So you mentioned the Supreme Court overturning a ruling. Can you break down exactly what happened there?
Sure. So basically, there was an attempt to settle the debt with BCCI.
Right.
Outside of the formal insolvency proceedings.
Okay.
But the Supreme Court stepped in and said, hold on, you can't just bypass these established procedures, even if you are trying to settle a debt.
Right.
They emphasized that any settlement has to go through the proper channels with oversight from the insolvency resolution professional.
So it sounds like the Supreme Court wanted to make sure everything was above board and fair to all the creditors, not just BCCI.
Exactly. The court really underscored the importance of transparency and following the rule of law, especially in a high-profile case like this.
So what does this really mean for Byju's chances of survival? Is it game over?
It's a critical moment for them. They're going to have to be incredibly strategic in navigating this insolvency process. Rebuilding trust with their creditors is going to be crucial, as is addressing those concerns about their financial practices head on. And of course, they'll need to come up with a solid plan to restructure their debt.
So do you think they can actually pull themselves out of this?
It's hard to say for sure. They still have a lot going for them, a large user base, a strong brand, and some valuable assets.
Yeah.
But they need to make some radical changes. Their focus has to shift from chasing growth at all costs to building a sustainable and profitable business model. They need to prove their commitment to ethical practices, and they have a lot of work to do to repair their public image.
It sounds like they need to completely revamp their approach, not just make a few superficial changes.
You're absolutely right. Byju's experience, while dramatic in its scale, actually highlights some systemic vulnerabilities within the ed tech sector as a whole.
So Byjus isn't alone in facing these challenges?
Not at all. The pandemic, as we mentioned, created this huge boom in ed tech, leading to a surge in investments and valuations.
Right.
But it also led to this frenzy where some companies like Byju's prioritize growth above everything else, maybe to their detriment. Now, as the market is cooling down, we're seeing a sort of reckoning.
So what does that look like for the ed tech industry? What's the future hold?
It's a period of adjustment and hopefully maturation for the sector. We're likely to see a shift towards more sustainable business models, a greater emphasis on the quality of education being offered rather than flashy marketing campaigns, and a more thoughtful and responsible approach to integrating technology into the learning experience.
So it's about finding a balance between innovation and a genuine commitment to educational value.
Precisely. We might see a move away from this one-size-fits-all model of ed tech towards more personalized and effective learning experiences. There's also a growing realization that technology should complement traditional teaching methods, not replace them entirely.
So it's about using technology as a tool to enhance education, not as a shortcut.
Exactly. And we can't overlook the ethical considerations surrounding ed tech. Data privacy, equitable access, and the potential for bias in algorithms are all crucial issues that need to be carefully addressed.
So Byju's story is a wake-up call, not just for the company itself, but for the entire edtech landscape.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that building a successful and enduring business isn't just about attracting investors and scaling up as quickly as possible. It's about creating something sustainable, operating ethically, and delivering genuine value to your customers. And that's a lesson that applies to any industry, not just edtech.
Byju's journey is a powerful reminder that we should approach any new technology or business trend with a healthy dose of critical thinking.
I completely agree. Don't get swept up in the hype. Ask the tough questions.
Right.
What problem is this technology really solving? Is it truly adding value? What are the potential downsides and risks?
It's about being an informed and discerning consumer.
Yes. And when it comes to ed tech, remember that education is about more than just consuming content or acquiring skills. It's about fostering critical thinking, nurturing curiosity, and encouraging a lifelong love of learning. Those are the values that should be at the heart of any educational endeavor.
That's a great point. Don't just blindly trust the promises of any edtech company. Do your own research, think critically about the educational value they're offering, and prioritize a holistic and well-rounded learning experience.
I think those are some of the key takeaways from this deep dive into the world of Byjus.
What surprised you most about their story?
I think the speed of their decline was truly shocking. They went from being a darling of the investment world with a valuation in the billions to facing insolvency in a matter of years. It's a stark reminder that even the most successful startups are vulnerable to market changes, internal struggles, and reputational damage.
Yeah, it's been fascinating following this story from their humble beginnings to their meteoric rise, their aggressive tactics, their financial struggles, and now these legal battles. It's a story full of twists and turns that raises important questions about the role of technology in education and the future of edtech as a whole.
Yeah, it really makes you wonder, could they have avoided this? Or are these kinds of risks just inherent in this whole unicorn startup culture?
That's the big question, isn't it? It's easy to view this as a simple case of greed and overreaching ambition, but I think there's more to it than that. The pressure to grow at this unsustainable pace, the allure of those sky-high valuations, and the constant flow of investment money, it can create a distorted reality.
It's like they were on a treadmill that kept speeding up and they couldn't get off. That's a great way to put it. And it's not just the company itself that gets caught up in this. Investors, the media, and even the public, we all buy into the hype.
Right.
We celebrate these disruptors and unicorns. Maybe a quick definition here would be helpful. A unicorn is a privately held startup company valued at over $1 billion. It's become this sort of holy grail in the startup world.
So there's this intense focus on achieving that unicorn status.
Exactly. And we often do that without really examining the underlying business fundamentals. We get dazzled by the rapid growth and the promise of disruption without always considering the long-term sustainability or the potential consequences.
So it's a systemic issue, not just a case of individual failings.
I believe so.
Yeah.
We need to rethink how we evaluate and support startups. We need to move beyond this obsession with growth at all costs and these billion-dollar valuations. Instead, we should be focusing on building businesses that are sustainable, ethical, and truly add value to society.
It's about creating real impact, not just generating hype.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Byju's story offers some valuable lessons for all of us, whether we're entrepreneurs, investors, or just consumers trying to navigate this increasingly complex world. It's a reminder to think critically, to question assumptions, and to prioritize long-term value over short-term gains.
That's a great point. It's about looking beyond that shiny surface and really understanding what's going on beneath it.
Right. And when it comes to education, it's essential to remember that it's about more than just acquiring information or skills. It's about fostering critical thinking, nurturing curiosity, and inspiring a love of learning.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the fascinating world of Byjus, What are your final thoughts for our listeners?
I think it's a call to action for all of us to be more discerning consumers and more thoughtful participants in this tech-driven world we live in. Ask questions, do your research, and remember that technology is a tool. It can be incredibly powerful when used wisely, but it can also lead to unintended consequences when its limitations are ignored.
Well, thank you for guiding us through this complex story. It's been a truly insightful journey.
It's been my pleasure. It's a story that raises so many important questions, and I hope it encourages everyone to think critically about the role of technology in our lives and the kind of future we want to create.
And for our listeners, we'd love to hear your thoughts. What stood out to you most about Byju's story? What are your own reflections on the future of EdTech? Share your reactions and keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay curious.